So the first two speakers are Scott Goetz and Gonçalo Vieira, and you guys can introduce yourself, please, when you present. We're going to start with Scott.
Okay, great. Hi, thanks everybody for joining and happy to be here today. My name's Scott Goetz. I'm at Northern Arizona University and I lead a rather large activity I'll tell you a bit about called the Arctic-Boreal Vulnerability Experiment. Next slide, please. So above, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a NASA-led activity. It's focused on Arctic and Boreal North America in particular, but with extension to satellite imagery and modeling. It's really pan-Arctic and pan-Boreal in scope. It's just most of the field activities are focused in North America of necessity. Next slide, please. So it's a large activity. We just passed 1,000 science team members, and there are another 1,000 people who follow the activities. Next. And there's also a lot of publications coming out of above. We could advance the slide. So above, I should point out, is a 10-year activity, and we just entered the third and final phase. So there've been nearly 500 peer-reviewed publications. We'll probably surpass that in a matter of weeks from 155 different projects, mostly funded by NASA, but there are also over 100 affiliated projects and, over 30 affiliated projects. And if you are interested, and you can easily become an affiliated project with above, which will just basically bring you into the loop on what's happening in the news and so on. Next. And also data archiving is a really critical part of what we're doing. There have been 266 data sets archived as of last month. A lot more are planned. They're already highly accessed and used by a number of users out there, probably some of you. Most of them are where NASA likes to have data archived, which is the Oak Ridge National Labs Distributed Active Archive Center, the icon in the middle bottom there. It's all open access there. Next. So what I will do for the rest of the presentation is just give you an update that was presented at the 9th Above Science Team meeting last month from the Hydrology and Permafrost Working Group, which is led by John Kimball and David Buttman. Next, it's got over 70 members. Next slide. It's got quite a few members, and it has these objectives as stated, which are basically to assess the processes controlling changes in permafrost distribution and their properties and impacts, to get at the causes and consequences of the hydrologic change, including water storage, mobility, and distribution, and to get at the water, energy, and carbon cycle linkages. And to do that, there's really these cross-cutting and synthetic activities across above working groups, other above working groups, including the disturbance, carbon modeling, wetlands, and vegetation working groups. Next. So what I'll do now is just give a really quick synopsis of some of what's coming out. Just as I noted earlier, a lot of publications are coming out in the last 5 years. There have been over 100 that are hydrology and permafrost focused, which is about 1/3 of the total above publications. And the same is true with the Environmental Research Letters special issue that we have going, and you're all welcome to contribute to. About 1/3 of those papers are focused on the permafrost and hydrology themes, as well as a lot of different data sets archived. Next slide. So I'll give just a few highlights that were put together by the working group leads. And those are, they'll just be brief synopses really, but in terms of improved understanding of permafrost and hydrology trends, drivers, and ecosystem impacts, there have been several nice papers that have come out recently, a couple of them highlighted here. One is focused on how permafrost thaw is driving water cycle declines across lake-rich areas of the Arctic in North America. That's shown in the graphic on the right there. And then another really nice paper, a review paper led by Tor Jorgensen that came out in the ER-Alphos collection of above, looking at the drivers of historical and projected changes in permafrost parts of the boreal ecosystem. Next slide. That review paper is really good if you haven't seen it yet. Also looking at improving models and predictions of hydroecological processes and linkages in permafrost landscapes. And the graphic here is showing the influence of tundra shrubs on permafrost stability. And that's the paper in Nature Reviews in Earth and Environment, looking at the relationships between tundra greening, soil hydrology, and permafrost thaw. There's a couple other papers listed there, but the one at the bottom I'll highlight as well, which is using machine learning predictions of aquatic CO2 and methane concentrations in relation to water body size and fire disturbance in global biogeochemical cycles, led by Ludwig, who some of you probably know. Next slide. Also, advances in new understanding of the hydrologic influence of Arctic-Boreal carbon sequestration and storage. So the graphic here is looking at the importance of lake emergent vegetation on methane emissions, looking at over 4,500 lakes across the North American domain. That's the first presentation there. There's also a couple of nice new papers led by Donatella Zona, looking at snow and soil moisture controls on tundra carbon sequestration and the timing of greening and interactions with snowmelt. Next slide. And also, because this is a NASA-led activity, there's a lot of effort focused on advancing the capabilities of remote sensing and derived products from remote sensing, in this case, to look at and resolve climate, terrain, and vegetation patterns and linkages with in permafrost landscapes. And that has included pretty advanced work looking at multi-frequency synthetic aperture radar, interferometric SAR from L-band as well as P-band instruments. We flew a lot of aircraft data I don't have time to get into today, but we have we flew both L and P band SAR as well as hyperspectral and LIDAR across the large part of the Arctic or the above domain in Western Canada and Alaska. So these are some results that were reported in Earth and Space Science on using this sort of synthetic approach to multi-frequency SAR. And then there's a couple other publications listed there on the geomorphic patterns of remotely sensed methane hotspots. Next. So right now, as I mentioned, we are at the end of phase 2, beginning of phase 3. So there's at the science team meeting, we talked a lot about wrapping up the synthetic activities in phase 2. I already mentioned the Jorgensen et al. Review. There's a lot of effort getting at active layer properties and spatial upscaling across the domain, getting at active layer thickness trends using remote sensing. And that's just not the above domain, but actually trying to take that to the whole Northern Hemisphere, active layer trends in a publication you see there. And again, the interactions of permafrost, hydrology, and carbon linkages in the Zona presentations. Next slide, which I think is the final one. And then we talked about what are potential synthesis activities going into phase 3 at the last science team meeting. And that's focused, or some of the ideas there were focused on getting at what's happening in the deeper permafrost zones and how changes in talc development and connectivity are affecting water budgets and the flow of energy and materials in 3 dimensions. So I will leave it at that. Hopefully I didn't go too much over time, and appreciate your attention.
Thanks so much, Gonçalo Vieira. Looking forward to learning about Polar 2E.
Great. So first of all, thanks a lot for organizing this fantastic Permafrost Day, International Permafrost Day, and also for allowing us to present a bit on the research that we are doing within the Polar 2E. It's the Polar and Extreme Environments College from the University of Lisbon. It's an initiative that was organized, started about 3 years ago. I am the director of this college. Essentially, it's a networking initiative within the University of Lisbon, which joins researchers from the Faculty of Sciences, from the Institute of Geography and Spatial Planning, from the Institute of Social Sciences and Politics, and the Engineering Institute. And our aim is essentially to promote scientific and technological synergies, both on polar and extreme environments, both on Earth and also on space. So we really are aiming at targeting the frontiers of life in the extreme environments. And we aim, of course, in fostering new international partnerships, mainly in postgraduate training, on research projects, and also on technological developments. So I will tell you a bit of the ongoing research and our research in Canada and also in Antarctica, and how can this be used also to foster new collaborations with the permafrost community at international level, but also in Canada. So we target at a broad scope of research questions. I'm not going to read through them. Several of them are clearly related to permafrost because we have at least 2 or 3 teams in different faculties working on permafrost research for several years now. And we are conducting research in Canada for over 15 years, and essentially since 2014-15, with several projects going on, essentially in collaboration with Université Laval, with the Center of Northern Studies, and the Institut Nordique du Québec, with whom we have signed the Memorandum of Understanding, which helps exchanging students and also access to research stations. So I will highlight very briefly a few of the projects that we have been developing. One of our key areas is on mercury biogeochemistry. And we are studying in a project led by João Canário. This is a 3-year project funded by the Portuguese Science and Technology Foundation. We are studying permafrost salt lakes in Nunavik across a regional sector, aiming at better understanding mercury biogeochemistry and also the linkages between the ecosystem and the surroundings, also including a significant component of remote sensing. Another series of smaller projects that we have been running across Nunavik, from essentially in Umiuak and also Kujuarapik, is thaw ponds, with the PI being Carla Mora. Within this framework, we are focusing on the thaw lakes, and we have currently a PhD thesis going on. In fact, in the previous project, we have 1 master student and another PhD going on, and this one, another PhD student already in a quite advanced state, which is Pedro Freitas, which is aiming at mapping and better understanding the color changes in thaw lakes mainly across Quebec, but also in the Mackenzie Delta, and linking remote sensing observations with in situ monitoring. In Nunatariuk, an European project led by the Alfred Wegener Institute, we have been working for several years now on remote sensing of permafrost Arctic coasts, mainly in the Beaufort Sea area. Essentially also joining field observations with remote sensing data analysis. It's a collaboration which also involves the Geological Survey of Canada through Dustin Whalen and the communities of Tuktoyaktuk and Polotuk. Linking to this one, we have EU4PEC. It's an initiative led by BGEOS, Annette Barch, and also involving the Alfred Wegener Institute, where we are essentially working using our high-resolution ground truthing data sets, both on coastlines and also on infrastructure from several settlements and also coastal localities to validate remote sensing data sets on coastal erosion produced by medium resolution satellites. Moving further south, we are also working for several years in the Antarctic Peninsula, where we have several collaborations going on, and we are maintaining the Permantar network, which is a network of permafrost observatories, which collect continuously data on ground temperatures across a transect of about 400 kilometers in the Western Antarctic Peninsula. A project that started in Antarctica and now is moving towards the Arctic is the Antarctic Electrical Resistivity Monitoring Network, which is an automated prototype that we have been testing and installing in Antarctica in 3 sites. It is currently funded by the Swiss Polar Program and led by Christian Hauck, also with the involvement of Mohammad Farzamian, which has developed the system. And we are currently installing new systems which measure resistivity at 6-hour intervals in different sites in Antarctica. And there is also planned a collaboration with Tony Lukovitz for installation in Canada. In what concerns to contamination, we are also working in permafrost contaminants in Antarctica through a project led by Ruth Cesario. And more recently, we are also going to start with a project called TOW Impact. It's a 3-year project, which links permafrost degradation in Antarctic Peninsula, contaminants release, and infrastructure risk hazards associated to permafrost changes. A team at IGOT at the University of Lisbon is also working on biodiversity, essentially of Antarctic ecosystems, linking changes in the biodiversity to changes in active layer thickness and moisture availability. And Nunantar is another project focusing in Antarctica, which aims at studying the deglaciation of Antarctica based on the study of nunataks and cosmogenic dating. And I would like also to emphasize that we are organizing an interdisciplinary expedition to Antarctica next season. It's the CoastAntar 2024, which will aim at we are going to freight this fantastic vessel, and we will be doing field work along different settings in the Western Antarctic Peninsula shore. And for finishing, just let you know that the University of Lisbon has been quite active in Arctic permafrost research, not only in Antarctica, and we are currently organizing a permafrost priorities town hall meeting at UCOP6 in Spain on the 19th June 2023. It's co-organized by the International Permafrost Association and the European project EUPolarNet, and we aim at discussing the priorities for future research on permafrost, bridging towards ICARP and also bridging towards the new international polar year, so within a scope of 5 to 10 years. And just to let you know that in Portugal, every year there is a call for postdocs, 6-year postdoc contracts, which the deadline is now on 3rd of May, and it's an open call to at the international level. So if you have just had your PhD, or if you have your PhD for some years and you are looking forward to moving towards a country with a nice climate, but which also does permafrost research both in the Arctic and in Antarctica, please consider contacting one of the PIs of Polar 2E, because we have lots of ideas and we would love to host you. Yeah, so this would be my presentation. Thanks a lot for listening.